Chapter 29. Washing through Mobius, this living archive, immersed and enmeshed in the stories of those contained within it, Grace could feel Velda's sense of rising panic. She sat scouring radio waves only to hear reports of last night's events at Dover. With the British government having fallen and no military force left, there was no one to hand the keys back to. Downing lumpy gray proneutrino, she slammed the tin cup back on the side before hammering away on a punch bag she'd fashioned out of rubber tires and rope. Keys to England. Sweat bead on her brow, fists slamming a double uppercut before finishing off with a back kick. Like hell she'd let them keep it. She wouldn't be surprised if they'd been the ones behind the blitz, ensuring there was no one left to hand it back to. The walls of the small basement felt as though they were closing in. Clipping in a couple of Glocks, she threw on a jacket and grabbed her bag. Free running through what resembled a ghost town, she flew through dead streets, over burnt-out cars, and scrambled up window bars and onto a roof. Sailing between buildings with a series of jumps and rolls, the rush, the reaction. Not even her thoughts could catch her. Nothing existed here but instinct and adrenaline, the wind in her hair, in the earthy, wet smell of concrete and new beginnings. Finally slowing to a stop, legs refusing to go on, she sat atop a parking lot, gaze falling over their dying city. Her attempts to rally the troops had been unsuccessful. Crime syndicates and mercenaries had begun carving it up. The sun sank below the horizon, and with it, their world into darkness. Grace watched weeks roll by. Cities became largely unrecognizable as the Volkov and other crime syndicates battled the SMC for key strongholds, and what little remained of civilized empire returned to dust. Asterisk. Ink tells a story, Smokey drawled as twilight broke, clipping on a long-range scope, lining up a shot next to Burlow, who eyed his many tattoos. You should try it. Speaks volumes. Every line on my face does that, Burlow muttered, attention on the 4x4 that had rolled up, gesturing to AMJ a few yards away. It was time. All eyes were on the runway where rotors stood to meet the 4x4 in today's long-awaited exchange. Despite their combined experience, the nature of today's job meant tensions were high. Disapproving eyes ran over Dimitri and his missus as they climbed out and made their way past Nomi and Cosmo, who limped toward Rotor, looking far from their best. It had been a few weeks since they'd taken Dover, and today's hostage exchange was long overdue. So that's the man, the legend, the monster. Petrov, AMJ mused. Out in the open. He should in theory have burst into flames by now. Sunlight and all that. One can only hope. AMJ's finger hovered round the trigger. One shot, that's all it would take to rid the world of a monster. But to Grace's surprise, Petrov's steely grays cut across the runway and fixed right on her where she hung behind AMJ, far off in the tree line. Creepy fucker. AMJ shifted uncomfortably as the corner of Petrov's mouth pulled back in amusement. Eyes pinned to Grace. To her horror, she seemed to have gone from bystander to person of interest and could feel him forcibly rooting through her mind, thoughts, actions, lingering on location. It seemed a silent threat. And I know where to find you. To her relief, it was over quickly, as Dmitri and his wife climbed into the armored 4x4. Petrov followed in one lithe move before they sped off. Asterisk. That morning, Annika woke in a cold sweat, blinking back the sight of those steely grays, the man's face shrouded in shadow. She'd been sat in a cafe in her dream, talking to him at length, when all of a sudden, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby. Out of her mouth. Yes, in her dream, her baby came out of her mouth in front of everyone. More surprising still, nobody seemed to think it odd except her. Grace watched Annika toss and turn, trying to focus on the soft pillow beneath her head, trying to seep under the cool waters of her imagination again. But they seemed tidal, having withdrawn completely. Looking enviously at Alessandro, who slept next to her, her eyes narrowed on the clock. 3 a.m. Begrudgingly, she pushed back her side of the blanket and pottered to the kitchenette in their cold, empty flat, lit by twilight. May as well make myself useful, she supposed. Sinking into a chair under the moon's silver glow, she fired up an old laptop that whirled its objection. It was around 8 a.m. when Alessandro placed a fresh coffee beside her, smiling down at the data Annika had managed to collate. Rare to find anyone else who lives and breathes data, he chortled, marveling at the unique connections she'd found. Occupational hazard. She breathed in the coffee. They'd managed to amass a large group of hackers, cypherpunks, and rebels from across the globe. Trawling through the data which had flooded in since Alessandro's leak proved more than a full-time job for the handful of them. Annika sighed. Looking back at her screen, she couldn't help but feel there was something they were missing. A connection. Something that'd make all this madness make sense. But she hadn't found it yet. We've published so much. Why is no one listening? We're offering problems, not solutions. People can't handle the ones they got as it is. He gave a thoughtful nod, considering how best to broach the subject. And, he sighed, it matters who they hear it from. A guilty shade splashed across his face. Many still blamed him for this mess, and in truth, he blamed himself. If only we had someone who cared, someone the public would recognize, who fought for them to the very end. Part of the old system, but not embroiled in its corruption. Someone just like you, but... Annika's eyes narrowed, catching his drift. She hates me. It's me she hates. Oh, well, that's problem solved then. Her eyes rolled off Alessandro and back to her screen. She's exhausted all other options, Alessandro ventured. And she needs you about as much as you need her. I've never needed anyone. Annika began clearing up the mess of papers on her lap. You have something she needs, global reach. And with our tech... He watched her still. She couldn't deny the spark of hope, that her elusive twin might stick around, spend time if they were building a way out of this mess together. But hope made it incredibly hard to maintain the stubborn stance she'd used to protect herself the past few years. Or are you going to let the future burn, all because you're afraid of a little pushback? Are you really that fragile? He smiled at the defiant glare he knew was coming. Fine, she growled, but if she bites my head off, you're one man down. Woman, one woman down, Alessandro corrected with a satisfied grin. Not when I point her in your direction. She watched his face turn satisfyingly gray at the thought. Asterisk. A few days later, Velda forced open a stubborn door in the abandoned warehouse she'd suggested the informant meet her at, foot quickly barring entry. To Velda, it seemed like looking in a mirror, one that reflected all the poor choices she'd managed to avoid so far, where she eyed the tatty clothes and scruffy red head on her twin, green eyes sparkling back expectantly. Rest of the CSI crew in there, Catherine? Annika grinned, watching Velda smooth down her blouse and brown leather jacket. It saddened her to see her twin's unruly curls straightened out, eyes having lost the sparkle they once shared. With a playful smile, she threw a glance behind the door to see Velda's foot in the way. My foot in my mouth usually does the trick. What was it Velda had called it? Verbal diarrhea. Annika's eyes sparkled up to see her twin's lips press firm, no trace of humor, not even a response. So that's what it would look like, she mused, if her soul ever left her body. I do have something that could help. Well, someone. She paused. It's a bit of both, actually, Annika rambled, wedging the projector on her watch through the narrowing gap in the door. Glaring at the flickering projection, Velda felt nails bite to the palms of her hands. It was the hacker and cypherpunk Alessandro Visser, who they tried to put behind bars after his data leak. The Blitz, however, had seen to it that may never happen. Her eyes pinched on the source of all their problems. She'd have slammed the door if Annika's arm wasn't already in it. He's responsible for all this, she snapped over his pre-recorded speech. That's a stretch. Releasing classified files leading to countless loss of life? Nearly my own. He shed light on abuse, war crimes, corruption, and... He's responsible for all this. She glared at the dust and rubble behind Annika. Absolute chaos. The absence of all law and order. The devastation of our military bases. Deaths of at least 300 special branch operatives, nearly my own. And yet saved hundreds of thousands more than your forces. Trust you to say that. What do you mean? That you're just the same. Immature, with no real concept of what's really going on. He's trying to help. He broke into top-secret files, unleashed chaos at the worst possible time, and triggered a global civil war. You can't pin all this on him. He published the truth. Truth is subjective. Only when you're hiding it. Annika's eyes tumbled with frustration and realization. You say I've no real concept of what's going on, but you're afraid of finding out. You haven't changed one bit, Velda snapped. You're still just as reckless, impulsive, and naive. Time you grew up, Annika, and face facts. Her eyes fixed on Velda. You want facts? We've got them. Raw data. See for yourself. Those correct channels. They were traps for whistleblowers. Annika's chin jut forward, watching Velda's mouth thin. You really want to make a difference? Prove it. We have a plan. We have resources. Use that training of yours. Look at the facts. What you got to lose.